if you're interested in terror, you should look at its causes. Now, if, for the point of view of apologists for state violence, like the ones you're mentioning, you're not allowed to look at the causes because that's considered rationalization or justification. So if you try to look for the causes, like every sane person does, that's rationalization. What you're supposed to do is have tantrums and scream about Islamic fascism and blame it on the bad genes of the Arabs or something. But you're not allowed to look at the causes, and there's a good reason for that. As soon as you look at the causes, you start looking in the mirror. And that you have to block. You know, the main task of intellectuals, always, but now too, is to make sure that people never look in the mirror. We never look at ourselves. We only look at other people. You look through hundreds of years of history, the West has a virtual monopoly of violence. So massive terror is the kind of thing we do to them. You know, they're not supposed to do it to us. September 11th was the first break. It's the first time in hundreds of years that any Western country has suffered on home soil the kind of the thing they do routinely everywhere else, you know. And in Israel, it's sort of the same. Actually, it was pretty striking for me to see this. I mean, after September 11th, I had a ton of interviews everywhere, except the United States, of course. And often it was national radio and TV. And often a couple of times it turned out to be Irish and television and BBC back to back. And the difference in reaction was startling, you know. I mean, and, you know, things that if I said this much on Irish TV, okay, discussion over, everyone understands what I'm talking about. Try to say it on BBC, you have to go on for like about an hour to explain to them what you mean. The Irish Sea is a chasm, you know, and it just depends who's been holding a whip for 800 years and who's been under it for 800 years. And the same is true everywhere else in the world, you know. But for the West, the idea that anybody should do to us a fraction of what we regularly do to them is just outrageous, you know. And the same is true in Israel. It's a 35-year occupation. I mean, up until very recently, they were immune, literally immune from retaliation from within the territories. And they weren't acting very nicely there. It was brutal, you know, humiliating, repressive, robbing the resources, kicking the people out, and so on. But there was no retaliation. Okay, last year or two, there's some retaliation. So it's, you know, scandalous. It's also considered a scandal in the West, right? Because we do it to them, it's okay, but they do it to us, it's not okay. You know, so if Israel invades Lebanon with U.S. backing and kills 20,000 people, well, you know, it's the way the cookie crumbles. It's not a problem. But if it goes the other direction, a couple people get killed, yeah, that's a horror story. September 11th, it was immediately predicted, and now we can look back and see that the prediction was correct, that every repressive force in the world would take it as a window of opportunity to extend what they were doing. So, for example, the Russians took it as an opportunity to extend the attack in Chechnya, pretending that it's a war on terror, and now with the authorization of Washington. The Chinese did the same in Western China. Indonesia did the same in Aceh, Israel and the occupied territories, and so on down the list. Furthermore, just about every government used it as an opportunity to try to impose greater discipline on their own populations, under, again, the pretext of a war on terror. So that's true of the more dictatorial states, like, say, Central Asia. It's also true of the more democratic societies with prevention of terrorism ordinances and other devices of one sort or another, mainly to try to discipline their own populations. These are just continuations of tendencies that are already in process, using this kind of opportunity to escalate it. And that was predictable, and of course it's happened.